Alrighty, in this video we're going to go ahead and put together our player animations. We're not going to worry about how they're going to interact with each other. We'll save that for the next video. But for this video I kind of wanted to put together the simple walk cycles, or walk cycle, the jump animation, the fire animation, and the death animation, as well as a nice little idle animation that will look like he's sort of breathing. So let's go ahead and get those animations set up so that we have something to work with when we go into our animator and actually create the different states that the player can be in. All right, Steve, you ready?
I am ready, sir.
Awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the player and I'm going to move him away from the level so that I can view him in isolation. It's just going to make him a little bit easier to animate. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the animation window and I'm going to click Add Curve. And then I'm going to jump into the animations folder and create a player idle animation. Now the player idle animation is going to interact with his body. However, an easier way to add that curve that doesn't require us to go in here and select that thing that we want to animate is we can just make sure we're recording. We can scrub forward to about maybe 20 milliseconds. We can open up his body, and then we can just kind of, go ahead and move him forward and to the right. But when we move our body forward and to the right, I want the left eye, the right eye, the left eye white, and the right eye white to go with them. So I'm going to reorganize the way my player is laid out in the hierarchy. I'm going to go ahead and put the left eye white as a child to left eye, which will unfortunately break the prefab connection. And in that case, we're not going to do it. Psych. What I am, though, going to do is I am going to reorder it. I want the right foot to appear below the left eye white and the right eye white, so that I can select all of these just by clicking, holding down Shift, and getting all of these items. Now I'm going to make sure that I'm over here on 20 milliseconds, and I'm going to make sure that I'm in recording mode. So let's go ahead and move his stuff forward and to the right. And now we have him kind of going up a little bit. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrub forward to 40. I'm going to copy all these initial keyframes. I'm going to hit Control C and then Control V, which will reset him back to his initial position. Okay, so that looks a little bit too dramatic for a idle animation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend the keyframes out a little bit. Move it maybe to 1 second, and maybe move this to 30 seconds. Then I'm going to select this keyframe right here, and I'm going to move him back a little bit, so it's a little bit less dramatic. And you know what? I think that actually looks pretty good. It's a very subtle effect. Steve probably can't even see it on his end.
In fact,
I love how you were like, in fact, and then you cut off like you lost your internet connection. In fact,
it looks awesome, and yes, I can see it.
All right, sweet. So let's go ahead and hit play and see what we got. Yeah, I like that. It's very nice, very subtle. It just looks like he's sitting there and breathing. Okay, now let's work on his jump animations fire, then his death. His movement animation we're going to do last because it's the most complicated. So I'm going to come up here to player idle. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to say create new clip. Then I'm going to go into my animations folder, and I'm going to call this player jump and save out. Now the player jump animation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up some initial some initial state of the player jump. The initial state of the player jump is not actually going to be the same thing as the initial state of the player when he's looking like this. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend out his arms and extend out his legs a little bit. So, making sure that I'm in recording mode and that I've scrubbed down to 0, I'm going to take his left foot and I'm going to rotate it a little bit and move it out like that. And then I'm going to take his right foot and I'm going to rotate it a little bit the other way and move it out like that. Then I'm going to take his, let's take his right hand and let's move it back like that. Maybe rotate it just or not that way, rotate it like that just a tad. And then take his left hand and I'm going to move his left hand out and rotate it a little bit like that. So it looks like he's kind of going, whoa, I'm a sphere, and I have really weird looking eyes. In fact, we can make his eyes a little bigger too. So let's come in here, make his eyes a little bit bigger, and not move his body, because we don't, remember, do not accidentally move his body, because that will result in his body being animated, which we don't want. And then I'm going to take his other eye and make it a little bit bigger too. So that's going to be his default jump state, but I do want to make a little animation. I just want to make him look like he's flailing a little bit. So I'm going to go up here to maybe 30 milliseconds, and to make him flail, we'll move his hand like that, we'll rotate it up a little bit, and then we'll move his other hand down here and rotate it down a little bit. Take his foot, again, you can tell I'm really not an animator. Does that surprise anybody watching the video, actually, that I'm not an animator?
Well, since you're a programmer, no, it doesn't really surprise me.
But we will do something simple, like rotate this down, move it down. Again, this isn't an animation VTM, this is a game development, but we do want to make him look a little flailing. Now that we have that, we've moved them into their different positions. I want to go up here to maybe 50. I want to grab all of these keyframes, so I'm going to make the animator window a little bit bigger. I'm going to grab all of it, hit Control C, and then Control V. And this will make the animation loop. So it looks like he's kind of going, kind of ish. I don't know, maybe I just have a crazy imagination.
I like that.
Alrighty.
No, I kind of had a superhero pose for you, and this is much funnier.
So I am going to tighten up the keyframes just a tad so that they execute just a little bit faster. Again, I prefer doing that than setting the sample size. So now he looks like he's just moving his hands and his feet, and it actually looks really terrible. But again, this is definitely something that you guys can tweak a little bit more. The quality of this animation is not going to affect anything when we go into the animator and put his states together. Okay, so now we have his jump animation done. Let's go ahead and do his fire animation. So I'm going to come up here to player jump, and I'm going to say create new clip. And I'm going to go into my animations folder and say player fire. We're going to hit enter. And his fire, what do we want, Steve? Like his hand would move forward a little bit and then go back, kind of like a slide on a rifle. Is that what we wanted?
Yeah, we can do it that way. You can either do it that way, or you can have it. You can either do it that way, or you can do it kind of then up and then down in an arc, like you'd throw a knife. Whichever way you want to go.
So how would I throw a knife?
He's in his default state, right?
Mm-hmm.
His hand would go straight up and spin the fingers up.
Okay,
like
so
on par with his eyes.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrub into about 30 milliseconds. By the way, if I scrub into 30 milliseconds in record mode and make a change, it'll actually interpolate from his base state into the new state, which is really cool. So it'll add 2 keyframes. Okay, so you said up and to the right.
No, just straight up,
Okay,
kind of on par with his eyes.
Okay, straight up.
And now just spin it so the fingers are up.
Okay.
And then, well, we'd actually probably want to do this in like 3 or 4 keyframes to get a nice smooth arc, but for the sake of this, it's going to be so fast, I don't think we care. Then you can point the fingers, create a new set of keyframes.
Okay.
And then point the fingers straight forward or to the right.
Okay.
And stick the hand out in front of him a bit. Kind of on level with where it started.
That, I'm missing something here, but I think that'll be fine. It looks ridiculous, and I think ridiculous is what we're going for. So,
and actually you did it right. I just would have exaggerated it a little more.
Okay.
But yeah, that's the art. That's all you really need for a 2D character like this.
Alrighty. So let's go ahead and tighten up the keyframes again so it goes a little faster. I didn't like how slow it was before because this is going to be a really quick motion. And I think that should work out just fine. Okay, so that's the player fire and his jump and his idle. So let's go ahead and do his death. I'm going to go here to player. I'm going to say create new clip. I'm going to go into my animations folder again, and I'm going to type in player death and hit enter. The player death is I just want him to disassemble.
Yeah, I'm letting you go hog wild on this one.
Okay, so let's just set our keyframe up at like 40 milliseconds, and then let's just like move stuff like over here, and then let's set the color of this foot. All the objects that I'm gonna throw like and move and like make disappear, I want to go ahead and set their opacity down to 0. And I can do that in recording mode just by coming in here and changing the opacity once I'm in that keyframe. Then let's take his other foot, so that's his left foot, or his right foot. Let's take his other foot, fly it, throw it all the way down here, and rotate it maybe a little bit, and then go into his color and set it to alpha 0. Color white, alpha 0. Then let's take his left eye, his right eye, or his left eye and his left eye white, do the same thing. Throw it up here, rotate it a little bit, take the sprite renderer and bring the alpha down to 0. You see how easy this is? How I can just grab multiple objects, start playing with them, and Unity's automatically creating all my keyframes for me. So then let's go into the right eye and the right eye white, and let's make it throw in the different direction, rotate it, set the color, go alpha down to 0. Then let's take the player's body, and the player's body I just want to expand really big, and then come down here to his, no, that's the player himself. I don't want to touch the player himself. Remember, we only want to work with objects that are children to the object that contains the animator. So we want to grab his body, make it really big, and then take the color and move it down to an alpha of 0. Then we want to take our hands, our right hand, let's just throw it back, maybe rotate it, set its color down to 0, and then take his left hand, move it, rotate it, and set its alpha down to 0. And let's see what that looks like.
This is going to be
Oh my god.
Does it look like we filled him up with helium until he exploded?
Yeah, that's kind of exactly what it looks like. The only thing I'm not happy about is this foot right here is a little bit too far away. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to move it back a little bit. I love it. We can go ahead and make it a little bit faster too. I'm going to have to bring my animator, because we have so many curves, I'm going to have to make my animator pretty much the size of my screen just so I can select all these keyframes, and then I'm going to move it down to maybe 30 milliseconds. No, maybe a little bit. There we go.
It should be pretty explosive.
Okay, I think that should work.
I got to tell you, at about 5 frames a second with bad latency, that's one of the funniest things I've seen in months.
All right, but it definitely looks like he's dying because nobody's going to be alive after that. Okay, so that takes care of our player idle, his jump, his fire, and his death. So now it's the walk cycle. My favorite thing in the world as a non-animator.
All the fun has ended.
Seriously, like from my perspective as a non-animator trying to make a walk cycle, it's like a non-programmer trying to write a compiler. I mean, that's how I see it. Like, so again, because we're going with sort of a ridiculous sort of animation scheme, I think whatever I come up with should fit just right in, especially considering our death animation looks like an exploding frog. Right. So let's go ahead and come back into click on player death and create a new clip. And I'm going to run into the animations folder, and I'm going to type in player walk and hit save. And now we have our player back to his default state, And we can now go ahead and make him walk. So we're going to put in 5 sets of keyframes here. So first, we're going to work on his feet. The first keyframe, we're going to want his left foot. Let's find his left foot. Where's his left? There's his left foot. We're going to want his left foot to be angled out like that and raised a little bit over there. And then we're going to want his right foot to be angled down a little bit and moved right here. So that'll be the first frame. The second frame, I'll scrub into about 30 milliseconds here, and I'll take his right foot and I'll rotate it back down to its original position, which is, I can just type in the number there.
You mean left foot?
His left foot, yes. Then I'm going to move it down here. Yeah, I know, I'll probably get confused between left and right here quite a few times. Then I'll take his other foot, see what I did there? And I'll rotate it up a little bit and move it a little bit forward, so they're kind of crossing at this point. So now we have that going on, and then I'm going to come up here to about 60 milliseconds in, and I'm going to take his foot that's flat, and I'm going to move it back a little bit. I'm going to translate it back, and then I'm going to rotate it up like that. Something like that right there. And then I'm going to take his other foot, rotate it forward, and move it forward. Then I'm going to create some more keyframes up here, let's say 1.2 milliseconds. And then we want his foot that's forward to be planted on the ground. So I want to take the rotation, move it back down to 0, and then move the translation down like that. And then we want his other foot to come a little bit forward and a little bit rotated more like it's crossing.
Yeah, we almost want it to kind of disappear. That's fine.
Yeah, okay, I think that walk cycle looks pretty good there. Now the last thing we need to do to complete the cycle is going to be to go a little bit further and create a new set of keyframes by clicking and dragging all these keyframes, hitting Control-C and Control-V. And that will complete our walk cycle.
Not quite.
Oh yeah. Okay, so we also want to make it look like his body is moving up and down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on 30, this set of keyframes. I'm going to click on his body, and I'm just going to move it up a little bit. Oops. I also want to grab his left eye, his right eye, his left eye white, and his right eye white. And I just want to move it up a little bit. Then, in the middle here, I want to move it back down. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo that. I'm going to, when I move him up on the second keyframe, I'm going to hold down Control and move him up. That's maybe a little bit too much. So maybe half that.
Yeah, it should be pretty subtle.
And then here I move him down. So we're just alternating between up and down. And on the last keyframe, I want him to return to where he was on the first keyframe. So currently it looks like he's heaving like that. And then on the last keyframe, I want to select his body from the first keyframe set, his body, his left eye, his right eye white, and his right eye. I want to select only these keyframes, so I want to hold down Control as I select them. And then I'm going to move all the way to the end, and I'm going to hit Control-C, Control-V. And that's the best walk.
He's gonna have like a 70s hipster walk, isn't he?
Well, you know what? It's the best walk cycle that you're gonna get out of a programmer.
Yeah, and like we said, this is not an animation course, and in all reality, if we were really trying to do a good walk cycle, we would probably have 8 to 10 sets of keyframes. But for the purpose of just walking you through how Unity works, this will do just fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward animation we have here, and it'll especially be able to demonstrate our blending and all of that fun stuff. I do want to make I want to take all these keyframes and I want to push them in a little bit because it looks like he's kind of dragging his foot at the beginning. It still looks like he's dragging his foot, but it's okay. All right. So,
Walk this way.
yeah, so stuff and things.
All right.
All right, let's go through our animations. We have a player idle, which just looks like he's kind of dancing a little bit. Then we have our player jump when she's flailing. That's like the worst thing ever. Then we have our player shoot, which he kind of looks like he's tossing a knife or something. And then we have our player death, the exploding frog. Then we have the player walk, which looks like that doesn't even look physically possible, but I think it demonstrates enough of the concepts that we were going for.
There we go.
Alrighty. So I think that pretty much wraps up our player as far as the individual animations that we want to add to him for this game. The next step is going to be going into our animator and actually creating the different transitions. Because of the way that this player is set up, the way that we have to set up his state transitions is going to be a little bit more complex than even the stars or the health packs. So let's go ahead and get that going, and we'll see you guys in the next video.